Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everybody, and welcome to a virtual session around privacy and consent management in the age of personalization. As an introduction, my name is Prashanth. I'm an architect working for Okta, focusing on our SIAM partnerships and our SIAM integrations. And in today's discussion, we're going to be talking about privacy and consent management, how our partners address some of this, how our customers address some of this, and what some of the best practices are. First things first, safe harbor statements. Again, please make your purchasing decisions based on what's available in the product right now, not on what we potentially might be discussing in today's presentation. So let's talk a little bit about how we are going to talk about this presentation. First, we're going to initially talk about what is privacy and consent management. We've heard it mentioned, from a bunch of different customers that we speak with, independent of vertical, independent of geo, independent of location. And there seems to be a lot of confusion as to what is it in the first place. Then once you understand what is it and how Okta addresses the privacy and consent management challenges, then we'll go into a set of panel discussion with our practitioners that will talk about what's required to make this successful, to make this kind of program successful, again, almost independent of geo and location, et cetera. And then finally, we're going to talk a little bit about some key takeaway. So one key takeaway from each one of our panelists so that we can actually make this actionable. So let's get started. So one of the things, when we started to think about privacy and consent management within Okta, one of the frameworks that we always thought about was how can you explain this that makes sense for everybody? So we started to use this concept around Maslow's hierarchy of needs. For those of you that do not know Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and unfortunately it's apt in this time of the year and currently, it was written by Abraham Maslow in his paper in 1943. And this is from Wikipedia, of course. The paper was titled "A Theory of Human Motivation." He subsequently extended the idea to include his observations on humans' innate curiosity. In other words, the theory is that most individuals' basic needs must be met before they get motivated to achieve higher levels of needs, which seems to be very apt, especially when we start to talk about privacy and consent management. So when we think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, let's break it up. So one of his initial needs is going to be, do I have my basic needs that are met? Meaning, do I have food? Do I have shelter? Do I have water, etc.? Then it starts to go into, okay, great. Once I have basic things like food and shelter, am I in a safe location? Am I in a place that makes me and my family comfortable and safe? Then we start to go into understanding of why am I here? What's my goal in life? What should I be focusing on, etc. From there, you start going into, am I a productive member of society? What can I do to make myself in this world productive and successful, and make my family productive and successful? And once you have ascertained all of those, then you go out and then you realize that you have attained everything that you wanted to in life, and then you go out and then you, of course, enjoy yourself. Now, what we decided to do was take this similar concept into privacy and consent. So we decided to call it Maslow's hierarchy updated. So once we started to look into Maslow's hierarchy updated, we started to break it up and have a similar set of criteria. One of the first things that our customers always had was, we know we collect information, we just don't know what kind of data we collect. So we have customers that, of course, are in healthcare that collect healthcare information. We have customers in the service industry that collect service data, so things like order, inventory information, etc. We also have customers that are also into help desk, for example. So they collect help desk information. Again, it's just a basic enumeration of what kind of information am I actually collecting. And once you understand what kind of information that you're collecting, then the question becomes well, where is this information that I'm actually collecting from? So meaning, is this information is in my CRM database, which is great? Is this information within my laptop? Maybe that's not ideal. Is this information in a BI analytics platform? Is this information in Splunk? Is this information someplace that I know that exists that I can go out and pull and do something with? Which is great once you get that level of details. You further break it down into, well, why do I even have it? Do I have it because we collected debug information that we forgot to turn off? Am I collecting it, or am I collecting it because it is needed in my BI analytics platform? Do I need it because it's an IoT system and I always have to have it in order to do things like MTBF, etc.? Now, once you understand all of those about why you have it, where is it, and what kind of information it is, then you start to go into, well, how do I comply with this information set that I have? Meaning, do I actually care about, do I have to be cognizant about things like GDPR? Do I have to be cognizant about the CAN Spam Act, right? Is it right to forget? Is it CCPA? Is it PIPTA? What kind of policies do I have to be compliant with as I start to do a basic thing about data discovery, data inventory, et cetera, across my entire system? And then finally, it's how do you actually automate all of these things? As we'll talk to within our panelists, they have gone through processes, procedures across a whole bunch of different industries in order to ascertain and in order to execute all of these different levels, especially on the automation front, because then you are starting to talk about people from very disparate, both regions of the world, aspects of the product line, and different mindsets. So when we start to look at the entire problem set within Okta, we almost think about it as a puzzle. And as with every puzzle, at least me, when I start with puzzles, I start with the corners and then work inside. So let's use a similar concept in this talk. Initially, we'll talk about things like omnichannel consent. Is how do you capture this information? How do you capture consent information? Where do you capture it? Do you capture different bits of data from different modes that a customer or a consumer is speaking to you, entering in your information, etc.? Once you have gone out and captured all of this information, then the question becomes, okay, now that I've captured it, now let's talk about the compliance requirements that might come down the road when a customer wants to execute against, let's say, a GDPR request, or they want to do a request around CCPA, forget everything to know about me, do not sell, etc. And then finally, you're looking at things like identity proofing. Is how do you make sure that the person that's making this request is that person and they are not somebody else? There was a really great presentation done at Black Hat this past year in 2019 around how do you, I believe it was to the 2019 or 2020, about this gentleman that actually got all of his fiance's information through executing proper GDPR requests. And the question becomes is how do you make sure that you are protecting your end customers and your end consumers' interests and data sets? And then finally, how do you automate all of these things? One thing that you will hear about from our panelists is the number of requests that they've gotten recently, especially since you are talking about companies that are based both in California, EMEA, et cetera, and all these different regions. It's just trying to see a lot more requests come through independent of where some of these guys do business. So now that we have all of these 4 different corners, let's start to fill in that information. So once you, of course, have gone out and captured this consent information, the problems that our customers have faced is basic things like, great, now that I've captured this information, how do I map this information to a single user identity? Most of our customers have multiple databases, multiple systems that they capture this database, this information from. But how do you make sure that I am Prashanth across all of these 10 different systems and that there are not 10 different Prashanths across all of these 10 different systems? And you're accidentally overriding the wrong Prashanth, for example. Then the question becomes okay, now that you have mapped all of the information to a single user identity, is how do you aggregate data from multiple disparate systems to make sure that you are updating the right information and also you're updating the right attribute? One of the challenges that we've always heard from our customers is there is no single attribute level mastering. So for example, from my mobile device, I can say I want to get text messages, but on my website, there's no way to either capture that information, update that information, etc. And then from a data integration perspective, how do you make sure that all of this information that you have gathered and to provide an omnichannel, a 360-degree view on a particular consumer is accurate across the board? Which means now you also have to think about how do you integrate this information across all of these disparate systems. And then finally, preference management as you go down the path about data integrations. So for example, there are times and ways and reasons why I want to be communicated through, let's say, an email versus a text or versus a piece of letter. Is how do you manage that level of preferences? Or even we've had customers that say, I want to manage my t-shirt size, for example, within Okta's UD, which is great. However, that information, they do not want that information to be shared with third parties. And if that's the case, how do you make sure to limit that level of access of that attribute to those downstream systems? Oh, and by the way, when the users want to go out and have the ability to download this information from all of these different systems, you want to be able to provide them the resources along with securely providing the resources to be able to download this information. And then finally, how do you make sure that from an access perspective, that the information that you're downloading is the ones that you're responsible for? So for example, especially in healthcare, you want to have, let's say, you have the right to be able to access your child's information, but not the other way around. So how do you go out and make sure that you're downloading and gathering the right set of information? So it goes back to data access. So now that we've understood the full problem set, within Okta, of course, we're not going to be able to solve all of these different components. Within Okta, we have partnerships that we'll talk about in a second. However, when you look at the entire problem set, we're not going to be able to address things like compliance, user download, identity proofing currently. So in those regards, we actually leverage our partnerships in order to be able to do it. So for example, within the compliance requirement space, we have partnerships with OneTrust and DataGrail that can help you with compliance requests. So we have Mallory here from DataGrail who will also give you her perspective about what she's seeing from her customers to be able to do this. On the identity proofing side, there's a handful of different partnerships that we have. This can range anywhere from Jumio, for example, to Evident ID, to Aquant, to Experian, to ThreatMetrics, in order to be able to facilitate identity proofing. And then, of course, we talked about data download a second ago. We have folks like both DataGrail and OneTrust that can also help you within this regard. So now that hopefully you have a good understanding of all of the different elements that are required in order to run a privacy and consent program, let's bring our panelists in and we'll talk about what it takes to actually execute a successful privacy and consent program. So our panelists, perfect. There's everybody. Hey, Mallory, do you want to go ahead and start with your introduction?
Yes. Hello, my name is Mallory Surpless. I am the head of customer success at DataGrail, a privacy platform that uses direct integrations in order to help companies comply with the ever-evolving data protection regulations that we're seeing here in the market and beyond. I'm excited to be here and to chat a little bit more about the challenges and trends that we're seeing in the market as those relate to data protection regulations.
Cool, thanks, Mallory. Jen, you're next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jen. I'm security at Okta. Jen is actually short for Genevieve, which is a very long 9-letter name. So we just use Jen with the G, though, no, not a J. And I'm the security assurance manager. So I work specifically in helping customers and prospects understand how Okta manages security and privacy, both in our company, both in terms of the product we offer. And my team also does assessments of our third-party vendors. So we understand things from both sides, how we look at privacy from our vendors and responding to privacy questions from our customers.
Perfect. Last but not least, Heather.
Hi, my name is Heather Wood. I am the Principal Privacy Program Manager at Outreach, which is a sales engagement software as a solution. So we are working in a space that is pretty heavily engaged when it comes to these privacy laws across the world. And in my role there, I'm looking at our company from the perspective of a data processor, as well as the perspective of a data controller, and building privacy into our product.
Perfect. So Heather, let's start off with you. So given that you guys are both a processor and a controller, and you of course provide advice both on the B2B and on the B2C side, can you talk a little bit about what your philosophy is on privacy and consent management?
So as far as implementation of the programs within the company, the philosophy's always been you have three basic needs. You've got people, process, and technology. And so the philosophy has always been get your people on board, help them understand why it is that you need to have these specific pieces of your program in place, so that the other pieces fall in line behind them. Without people, you won't have process and technology to rely on, because the people are still the ones driving it. So that's always been our philosophy at Outreach, as well as the companies that I've been at previous to this, is education, understanding, and then driving people to fulfill those processes, and then building technology to support it.
So when you think about people, process, and technologies, especially the people component of it, you've obviously talked to your constituents can vary, whether it be folks like Jen on the security side, product people, salespeople, etc. What's worked out well within as you talk to, let's say, the security folks and the product folks?
So specifically when it comes to security, that's actually probably been the easiest because I sit in our security team. When it comes to product and technology, it's really about helping them understand the reason that a product requirement is being put forward. So sitting down and explaining the laws that have been put into place and how it is that we are looking to operationalize those, both from an internal perspective as well as supporting our clients, customers' compliance. And so it's kind of the, if you think about it as the what's in it for me, if you're sitting down with your product and technology team, asking them to do something specific to implementing a privacy measure, how does it help them? Well, it helps them with being able to support the compliance of our customers, which then drives our customers to continue to buy our products.
So actually, experience both on especially with Okta, working with folks like myself who used to be SDs and salespeople. Can you talk a little bit about how you look at this when you talk to both internal consumers and also when you talk to partners of ours that we use in order to run our business day to day?
Yeah, absolutely. And I hope I wasn't hijacking Heather. I was just like agreeing. So I was just like, yes, I agree with all the things. And of course I'm biased. I'm also on the security team, right? And so security gets it. We do have really good partners within other business units though, who we consider security champions, right? So we have security champions within Okta who were like, you know what? Let's have you go talk to this person in business systems because they get it, right? They understand what we need and why we need it. And they help us communicate that effectively to other business units when we have to tell them, no, we need to approach this third-party vendor you want to use as, are they treating privacy first? Are they making that its primary concern, or is it an afterthought where they're kind of failing open, like, yeah, let's have all the things. Oh, wait, okay, there's like laws and stuff, so we'll give you a checkbox to disable stuff. I hate that, right? That's terrible. So just the idea that you want to leverage other successful implementations and relationships with business units to help you educate other business units as to how we need to approach privacy. Not only for the privacy of Okta in terms of our own data, but Okta wants to be lead by example, right? Rising tides lift all boats, right? We're all in this together. So if we can work with a vendor and we can help them to improve their privacy practices, that's just a win for all of us.
So I'll come back to
100%.
I'll come back to the security champion question in a few minutes because it's actually a really interesting topic, especially as you start to both talk to product managers, salespeople, sales reps, SDs, and of course and customers. So I'm going to come back to that one. However, I want to go back to the point that Heather made around people, process, and technology. So Mallory, you guys obviously handle the technology component of this, which is great. Talk to me a little bit about when you have started to talk to your customers around process and technologies. What's been their challenges? What's been the biggest challenges, and how have they come across some of these or solved some of these problems?
Yeah, I think that both Jen and Heather have really teed this up nicely. We're already seeing that privacy touches a lot of parts of the organization and also touches your customers. And so the challenges that we're really seeing are also really forcing us to capitalize on these trends. And the two biggest challenges we're seeing for our customers is incorporating privacy as a company value. The exposure is really high now that a complaint to a company is in the hands of users, prospects, and people that now are on the internet a lot. Now that we're all at home, and so when you have high exposure to an individual putting a complaint into your business for not processing their deletion or processing an access request to the information you might hold on them, the challenge is that you have to build a process that encapsulates the whole company. And so we're seeing a challenge is you're getting a breakdown. For instance, I saw a delivery company right now this morning, in fact, got a complaint via Twitter that their request for deletion was not done within the time span. And we're seeing, given where we are right now with COVID, delivery companies are doing really well. However, you're seeing a breakdown very quickly because the machine needs to be built for scale and to be able to take on these new parts of our business life that just got turned on its back. So that's a big challenge. Is really building for scale and reducing your risk and reducing your exposure. And then just building an agile model. We've seen CCPA technically even finalized. And we're seeing new regulations pop up all the time and changes and amendments. So the challenge is really building an agile model that puts you above the threshold. And then to really hit on the second part of that is what are the trends, right? The trend is to build a machine that scales using technology. You cannot stay ahead of regulations if you don't first have the machine built and the technology to support it. You need an integrated solution. This will allow you to plug into the needed applications and be able to act on new regulations rapidly. And the trend is to reduce your risk and exposure. As we already saw this morning for this delivery company, they now have a customer problem. You see that privacy is not going away, and it's actually a customer experience challenge that now for the first time you have legal, InfoSec, and C-suite that need to take on part of this customer experience role. So to be a customer-centric company, like a lot of us are, you have to include privacy in that, and it has to be the forefront.
And so in those instances, do you see certain verticals or certain industries that are more mature than others, or is everybody almost starting off from the same starting point?
Yeah, because regulations are in the hands of, it doesn't even need to be a user of your service, right? It could be someone that you've prospected to or that received an email. We are all on even ground because we have exposure, and individuals now have the power, which is how it should be, and that's why these regulations were created. But it puts everyone at risk. Your B2C companies are the ones that touch the most users and have the highest visibility in the market. So you're seeing them having a little bit more risk. However, if you don't have privacy as part of your product, that also puts you at risk too as a business. And so it really does even the ground between all types of businesses, whether you're B2C or B2B as well.
Okay. And you're almost seeing everybody within the same starting point, right? Independent of vertical on top of it.
Exactly. And then it's basically like, the days of HIPAA, where all of a sudden it doesn't matter really what your business does, this is really an equalizer, and compliance is compliance. One of the biggest parts of data protection regulations is having a process. So it doesn't matter if you're getting a ton of requests. It just matters that you have something in place that says to your user base and your prospects, hey, we care, and this is important to our business.
So this goes back to something that, at least on the Okta side, that Jen was super passionate about, which is talking about privacy policies and about plain English privacy policies. So if you ever get to, so let's hear Jen. I say venting, but I'm sure she'll say explaining about privacy policies.
I'm always, sometimes I like to emphatically educate. Let's call it that instead of mentoring. So one of the issues, so in terms of when my team, when we assess third-party vendors, one of the first things, our baseline is we need to be able to access and comprehend your privacy policy. That should be not something that's hard to find or hard to understand. We need to know that you know what you're doing about privacy, right? To speak to Mallory's point, right? That needs to be something that's right up front, because if it's not, then I'm automatically going to be like, why are we even looking at this vendor? Why are we even considering them? Because clearly they don't prioritize it. Because if they did, they would want to communicate it, right? So Okta, we did update our privacy policy specifically well before CCPA, and our DPO and his team did a great job with it. And what I love about it is that we used to have two separate locations, right? We had one for kind of the public website privacy policy, and then we had the production privacy policy over here. And I was like, let's get that in one place. It's now in one place. It's really clear. It spells it out. This is what we're doing here. This is where we're responsible. Like Heather, you spoke about data processor, data controller. For our customers, Okta is a data processor. We make it really clear. We're a processor. You control your data. We don't control your data. So that means we will work with you. If we get any kind of data subject request, we will convey it to you, but it's your data to handle, right? That's not our role. And it's also because we value privacy, because we have a privacy certification, we actually don't have the kind of access to your data that would be required to even address that data subject access request, right? Because that is how much we make sure you own your data, and we are just there to do what you want with it, right? So yeah, it's a matter of that you cannot make privacy an afterthought. You have to start with privacy, right? When you're looking at any product offering that's handling any personal information of any sort, you have to look at the privacy compliance requirements right from the start.
So Heather, given that you guys do business obviously in a whole bunch of different countries and not just US and Canada, and when you're talking about people and process, is how do you educate teams from different parts of the organizations with different backgrounds about what's important and why they should frankly give a damn? And
well,
also, how do you go
and
out
actually
do it? Sorry, go ahead.
So Jen actually touched on a really important part, which is the differentiation between processor and controller. On the very first day that someone starts with outreach, we have a training that we do. We have a security training, and then we have a privacy training. And as part of that privacy training, we are explaining data processor, data controller, data subject, and what personal information means. And then we start talking about this is how we ensure compliance at outreach. This is the reason that we're doing it. The education really comes down to being able to provide that very broad training when someone's first coming through the door to say, this is what privacy is and this is what it means to outreach. And then from there, we actually provide smaller trainings that are more job specific. So as an example, our product and tech teams really need to have a good understanding as to what privacy by design and privacy by default means. Whereas our SDRs, our sales team, really needs to understand what the difference between data controller and data processor is and how that changes the way in which they describe our internal processes to our customers. If they started describing the way in which we fulfill data subject rights from the perspective of a data controller, our customers are going to be very concerned very quickly. Whereas to Jen's point, we have to make sure that we are handling those requests within the legal construct that we have set up with our customers. And all of these things become very important in order to ensure that differentiated roles within the company understand what their requirements are and what they need to do given a specific type of request that they're likely to get. We also set up communication channels within things like Slack, and then we've got these group email aliases that are set up so that if they could run into a question that we haven't discussed before, they know exactly where to go in order to get help with it. And so they're not, kind of floundering around in the dark trying to find an answer from 6 different people in the business who may or may not have it. And so it really, and I'll say it over and over again, it always starts with your people and making sure that they understand what is expected of them, what's required of us as a business, and what we've committed to. Similar to what Jen said, we want to make sure that we are the gold standard in privacy and that the product that we're offering our customers fulfills that gold standard. And that starts with our people. It always will.
So even on the people side, though, is how do you educate, let's say, the SDRs, especially when they have to work with multiple constituencies, meaning customers from multiple regions, and they have to be cognizant of those particular regional laws, if you will, within privacy and consent.
So this is actually a very interesting conversation. We can't provide specific legal guidance. What we do internally is we have set up our program to be built around privacy principles. And then based on the areas in which we operate, we built those requirements around what the most stringent were for each of the laws that are applicable to us. Now, laws that are applicable to outreach may or may not actually be applicable to any one of our customers. So when it comes to looking at best practices, we provide guidance and blogs on that, which our SDRs then provide to our customers as well. But we're also very, very cautious to ensure that we never provide legal guidance to our customers because we don't necessarily know about their internal operations, and what would be legally applicable to them might be very legally differently applicable to us. And so we're always telling them, this is how we do it. Make sure you consult with your legal team to make sure that how you're doing it fulfills your legal requirements based on your legal constructs.
Got it. Hey, Mallory, I got a question for you, especially as we start to talk about that. You guys obviously have customers from a whole bunch of different regions. Can you help me understand? Let's pick healthcare. Let's pick one very specific vertical. If you pick healthcare, for example, in the US, you have, let's say, HIPAA, and in Canada, you have PIPEDA. So when you're talking to your customers around, let's say, healthcare compliance, how do you educate them, especially for organizations that are across regional boundaries?
Yeah, I think that Heather touched on one of the biggest proponents of this is creating our customers. What we're seeing is that they're creating a high threshold. And if we go back to the value of privacy within a business is to be privacy centric and privacy first in the model. And so when you have different regulations, whether they're in Canada, you have the ARCO rights in Mexico, obviously GDPR and CCPA here in the US. If you have created a high threshold for your users, those rights you actually are already fulfilling, whether they're slightly different for each location. And so a lot of our customers, regardless of where the individual is, it's making the submission for what information you have on me or objecting to processing or do not sell my information, those are available to anyone regardless of where they live. And so really building that into their model. And that's where the technology piece comes in. DataGrail, for us, we're the platform that enables our customers to choose what level and what threshold they're actually providing to their users. And they get to make the legal basis on that. We don't do that for them. We will never give them legal advice there, but we are the platform, the tool that allows them to pick that threshold.
Got it. So the recommendations that you make to your customers is, hey, start off with a super generic policy that covers a whole bunch of different attributes and bunch of different stuff, if you will, and then you can fill in the details based on the country that this request either falls into or the business that you guys do for that particular country.
Yeah, and it's important to note that you're not collecting new information about a user or prospect or lead when you're building in these programs. You're only using the information that you already have on them, and that's where the security piece comes in, right? You're not going against the law and getting more information from them. You're using what you have in your systems to actually check off a security proponent. But yes, you are, in a sense, building out something that is a little bit more widely used across all regions. And then our customers can pick what level they want to provide that at. There are a lot of different parts of these regulations that people are now aware of, right? The right to access what information you may have on me, the right to deletion, the right to object to processing, the right to do not sell my information. And we all know that the do not sell proponent piece redefines what sale means, which is a new definition that is, though a bit odd, pretty much applies to all businesses that are doing any retargeting, any advertising, and there's a lot to that. So it really does touch on almost every business.
So talking a little bit about, I know you guys have a relatively creative way of doing things like identity proofing, especially when you ask for a deletion request or like a download request. Can you talk to me a little bit about how you guys are handling things like identity proofing when those requests come in?
Yeah, as kind of noted a little bit before, it's really important that businesses take the security of their users at the forefront. When you are a individual asking a business to know what information do you have on me, that is a security risk. And so Jen probably over there is, has dealt with this a lot as well. Is you don't want to be providing someone information that is not in fact theirs. Now, when a request comes in, you're having to scour all parts of the business, whether that's sales, marketing, HR, customer success, product. Where does that information's user live? And it lives everywhere, really across the organization. So in order to mitigate your risk, you need to have an identity verification process at the first and foremost point of contact with the user. And so at DataGrail, we have a 3-point system that first enables us to understand, do they have inbox control? Do they have access to the email that they're using to put this request in? Secondarily, can we do a phone verification? And third, can we do a security verification as well with security questions? And so we allow our users, depending on what type of data, how sensitive it is, they can do different levels of identity proof and verification. What's important to note is that last year, after GDPR came out, there was a very, very famous company based in Seattle area that sent a German person a recording of Alexa to someone that didn't even have Alexa. So it does happen to even these companies that you think have a really robust process in place. But in fact, this is the most important thing you can do when you start the process, is be really confident in your security protocols to start, and at least have 2 to 3 levels.
Cool. I know we have about 5 minutes left, so let's just jump into from a key takeaway standpoint. Jen, let's start with you. So what do you think one of the key takeaways that people should have after this conversation?
So for me, I think the key takeaway is, if you're offering a cloud service, or really any product, but I mean, we're all cloud focused. So talking about a cloud service where you are managing anyone's data, any data, whether we consider it personal or not, right? By legal definition, just whatever that data is. If you don't have a privacy policy that is easily accessible and easy to understand, so that somebody knows, oh, this is what they're collecting and this is what they're doing with it. If you do not have that, you are doing it wrong.
Perfect. I like that clean and simplistic view. How about yourself, Heather?
Key takeaways from all the programs that I've implemented, I would say my key takeaway outside of people, because obviously that's a huge focus for me, would actually be the engineering teams and the product teams. So those specific people, those are the ones that are building these systems to do what they've been requested from the business to do. They essentially have the keys to the kingdom. They can tell you where the bodies are buried, if you will, what data you hold where, for what purpose. They have that information. Those are your most valuable people within the business, and making sure that they understand why they're important to your program is absolutely number one.
Got it. Mallory.
Yeah. To build on what we've said a little bit throughout this presentation, number one, privacy should be part of your company value. It's still evolving, and so putting that in the forefront is one of the most important things you can do for your business. And kind of the secondary piece to that is we talk a lot about how this is affecting business, but we also want to turn that into a positive. Make privacy an advantage. Make sure everyone knows about it and is excited about what it could actually do and unlock for your business.
Got it. So it's funny because my takeaway slide, I go back to this particular visual. And the reason I go back to this visual, oops, where is it? Let's go back. There you go. I go back to this visual. As we start to talk to our customers around privacy and consent, everybody thinks that there is a single tool or a single application that will solve a whole bunch of these use cases. As you've heard from our panelists that have the experience in building it, managing it, executing these requests, and educating very large team, the technology is only a really small component of this. There is also a people and a process component to this entire execution of privacy and consent management. So my takeaway from this conversation and from every conversation that I've had across the board about this topic is privacy and consent management is not a checkbox. It is an ever evolving set of stuff. Stuff can be process, technology, people, education, across the board. Thanks. That everybody should be cognizant about. And just like security training, this should be a part of your everyday training, like that's being done within Heather's organization. So, folks, any other key talking points that we did not talk about today that we should be talking about before we wrap this up? It's a free for all. Cool. All right. With that said, perfect. Go.
Reach out to Heather, Jen, and myself if you have questions or want to know what other people are doing. I always find that when things new and things change, it's nice to have a kind of community and people you can chat about with, just to either vent or just ask questions. Please reach out. We're happy to chat and chat more about what we talked about today and beyond.
But it's not venting.
Yeah, definitely.
It's enthusiastically expressing.
Come on, it's not venting.
We're going to be positive.
Cool. Anything else, folks, that we did not talk about that we should have talked about today? Going once, twice, 3 times. All right. With that said, thank you, everybody. It definitely has been a really interesting conversation. It would have definitely been more fun virtually, or not virtually, but in person. But it's just as fun virtually. Again, for the folks listening in, thanks again for listening. If you have any questions, either reach out to myself, reach out to any of the panelists. I'm sure we'll be able to help you. Thanks again, guys. Have a great week.